It's official, it's now confirmed. Enzo Maresca leaves Chelsea with immediate effect, and the club and the manager decided to part ways. I told you in the last 24 hours, the situation was really tense and really difficult between Maresca and Chelsea.
Chelsea have just pulled the trigger. The club officially confirmed they've parted company with Enzo Maresca.
This is what the club have had to say in a statement. Chelsea Football Club and head coach Enzo Maresca have parted company. During his time at the club, Enzo led the team to success in the UEFA Conference League and the FIFA Club World Cup. Those achievements will remain an important part of the club's recent history, and we thank him for his contributions to the club.
Just 18 months into a reign that included trophies, including the Conference League and the Club World Cup. 4 weeks, the fan base sounded like 3 different clubs arguing in the same timeline. One side couldn't wait for it to end. I will dance and praise the Lord if this man leaves Chelsea for good. Another side aimed higher up the chain. Sacking Maresca mid-season proves Chelsea's billionaire owners treat managers like disposable toys. And then there were the realists in the middle. Sacking Enzo now could do more damage. Give him the rest of the season with clear objectives. That was the mood. That was the split. And then December hit again. Chelsea's season collapsed into the exact kind of winter spiral that turns doubt into panic. 1 win in 7 league matches, points thrown away from winning positions, and a sense that the team never looked the same twice. A defense constantly reshuffled, a starting effort changing almost weekly, a project that suddenly felt like it was being rebuilt mid-match. Then came the quote that changed everything. Maresca admitted the last 48 hours were the worst he'd experienced at Chelsea, hinting that many people didn't support the team, before refusing to explain what he meant. And after the Bournemouth draw, when Chelsea needed clarity the most, Maresca didn't even face the cameras. But here's the twist. This war didn't just stay online. It didn't just stay in the stands. It ended today. So now the question is no longer, should Chelsea sack him? That decision has already been made. The real question is, how did a trophy-winning project implode this fast? And what does it reveal about who really controls Chelsea? When Chelsea brought in Enzo Maresca in the summer of 2024, it wasn't because everything had fallen apart. It was because they wanted something different. Chelsea had just finished 6th under Mauricio Pochettino. On paper, that looked like progress. They were back in Europe. The team had finished strong. The defense had tightened up. Young players were starting to look like they belonged. By any normal measure, Pochettino had earned another season, but Chelsea stopped being normal a long time ago. The board saw it differently. To them, 6th place wasn't good enough. Not because of the number itself, but because of how they got there. They wanted more than just results. They wanted control, not just winning games, but owning them, dominating possession, dictating the tempo, making opponents play their game. They wanted positional clarity, especially in how the team built attacks and occupied midfield. And most importantly, they wanted a system that could survive without superstars. A structure built around young, valuable players who could be developed and sold for profit if needed. A machine that didn't break down when one part was missing. So despite the European finish, despite the late season momentum, Pochettino was gone, and Chelsea went looking for someone who represented a completely different vision for the future. That person was Enzo Maresca. Maresca wasn't brought in to put out fires. He was brought in to redesign the entire building. He'd worked under Pep Guardiola. He understood positional play. He believed in patterns, not moments, systems, not individuals. He was everything Chelsea's owners thought they'd been missing. Control over emotion, repeatability over brilliance. The brief was simple but ambitious. Build a team that could control possession without becoming toothless going forward. Make Chelsea consistent through rehearsed patterns, not individual magic. Develop young players inside a framework that didn't collapse the moment someone got injured or lost form. This wasn't about patching holes. It was about rebuilding how Chelsea played football from the ground up. And in his first season, Maresca actually pulled it off. Chelsea finished 4th in the Premier League in 2024/25. Champions League football was back for the first time since 2022/23. They ended on 69 points, 20 wins, 9 draws, 9 defeats, and a plus 21 goal difference. Maybe those numbers don't jump off the page, but context matters. This was a team still recovering from ownership chaos, constant squad churn, and one of the youngest lineups in the league. That top 4 finish felt like order emerging from years of noise, but the league position was only part of it. On May 28th, 8th, 2025, Chelsea won the UEFA Conference League. They beat Real Betis 4-1 in the final, and the match became a perfect snapshot of what Maresca was trying to build. Chelsea went behind early, they didn't panic, they adjusted, and then they took over. Enzo Fernandez, Nicolas Jackson, Jadon Sancho, and Moises Caicedo all scored. By the final whistle, it wasn't even close, and with that win, Chelsea became the first club ever to lift all 4 of UEFA's major trophies. That wasn't just progress, that was silverware, proof, validation that the project wasn't just talk anymore. Then summer came, and belief hit its peak. In July 2025, Chelsea won the FIFA Club World Cup. They didn't just beat Paris Saint-Germain in the final, they dismantled them 3-0. It was brutal. Cole Palmer scored twice and set up another in a first-half masterclass. By halftime, the game was already over. Palmer walked away with the golden ball. Robert Sanchez took home the golden glove. By the time the 2025/26 season kicked off, Maresca's CV at Chelsea looked unreal. Top 4 in the league, European silverware, a world title. And that's exactly why today's sacking feels so surreal, because Chelsea didn't fire a manager who failed to deliver. They fired one who did deliver, and somehow still couldn't make it work. But success changed everything. After top 4 and 2 trophies, Chelsea were no longer being judged as a work in progress. They were being judged as genuine contenders, and that's when the pressure started to bite. The new season started well enough. There were flashes of brilliance, big away wins that showed depth, heavy rotation in Europe that still produced emphatic results. It felt like the system was strong enough to carry the team no matter who was playing. Through November, Chelsea were close enough to the top that calling it a crisis still felt like an overreaction, but underneath, things were starting to crack. Rotation was becoming constant. Defensive partnerships never had time to settle. Some matches were won comfortably, sure, but others felt controlled only in patches. The ceiling looked high, but the floor felt shaky. By November, Chelsea were living in 2 realities at once. On one hand, there was proof that Maresca's system could demolish top opponents when it clicked. On the other, there was a creeping sense that the margin for error was getting dangerously thin, and that's where this chapter ends. Because everything that came after, the December meltdown, the internal tension, the cryptic press conferences, and ultimately today's decision, only makes sense if you remember one thing. Enzo Maresca wasn't hired just to survive at Chelsea. He was hired to transform it, and for a while, he actually did. What comes next explains why it still wasn't enough. Chelsea fans have a name for it: the December curse. If you're scrolling through Twitter, it sounds like a meme, something supporters half joke about when the fixture list gets brutal. But under Enzo Maresca, December stopped feeling like bad luck. It started feeling like a diagnosis. Because here's the thing about December: it doesn't create problems, it just drags them into the light. When the games pile up, when players are running on fumes, when there's no time to train properly, that's when every weakness shows. Patterns you've drilled for months start to blur. Rotation becomes constant. Matches stop being choreographed and start becoming survival mode. And in those moments, you find out what a team really is. For Maresca's Chelsea, that discovery was painful. This wasn't even new territory. Back in December 2024, during Maresca's first season, Chelsea rolled into the festive period flying. 6 straight wins across all competitions. Then the wheels came off. 5 Premier League games without a win. The only relief came from an FA Cup tie against Morecambe. That winter didn't kill the project, but it sent a warning. It showed that this Chelsea, so structured, so dependent on rhythm and repetition, could become fragile the moment chaos entered the equation. 12 months later, that warning turned into a full-blown collapse. By the end of December 2025, Chelsea had won just 1 league game in 7 attempts. 1 out of 7. And this wasn't a team scrapping for survival. This wasn't some injury-decimated squad limping through a rough patch. This was a side that people had been talking about as title contenders just weeks earlier, now visibly unraveling. It wasn't even that they were being outplayed, it was worse than that. They were losing control. And if you want one number that explains why December became fatal, here it is. Chelsea dropped 15 points from winning positions. 15. That's not variance. That's not bad luck. That's not fine margins. That's a collapse in game management, repeated so often it became part of who they were. It told you Chelsea could start games brilliantly. They could create chances. They could take the lead, but they couldn't hold on to it. They couldn't manage transitions after scoring. They couldn't slow games down when they needed to. They couldn't protect a lead when it mattered most. And December is the month that punishes teams who can't do those things. Here's what made it all so frustrating. The data showed Chelsea weren't even broken. After 19 league games, their attacking numbers looked sharp. 32 goals scored, 21 conceded, an XG of 33.01, basically creating exactly what their output suggested. 184 shots, 92 on target, 543 touches in the opposition box. They'd hit the woodwork 7 times. This wasn't a team struggling to create. This wasn't a dysfunctional attack. But then you looked at the other side of the ledger. 4 red cards, 41 yellows, 221 fouls committed. That discipline record matters in December. Winter football swings on moments. Bad fouls, emotional mistakes, transitions when you're tired. When control slips mentally, games flip fast. Chelsea weren't failing to play football, they were failing to finish it. And the reason Maresca's system struggled so much in winter comes down to what it demands. His football is built on precision. It needs exact spacing between the lines, rehearsed angles and build-up, coordinated pressing triggers, partnerships built through repetition. When everything clicks, it's devastating. But December strips away the conditions that make precision possible. Rotation spikes, training turns into recovery sessions, familiar partnerships get broken up, and when precision drops even slightly, Maresca's system doesn't have a safety net. It just becomes vulnerable. Pressing arrives a second too late, distances stretch, the back line has to defend bigger spaces, and games that should have been controlled turn messy. Chelsea didn't forget how to play, they just lost the control layer that made everything work, and then came the moment that turned bad form into a full-blown crisis. Ironically, it happened after Chelsea's only league win in that 7-game stretch, a 2-0 victory over Everton. Instead of calming things down, Maresca made it worse. He admitted publicly that the previous 48 hours had been the worst since he'd arrived at Chelsea. Then he said something that set off alarm bells. Many people didn't support me and the team. That wasn't normal manager speak. That wasn't about tactics or formations. That was about something deeper, about trust, about backing. And when reporters asked him to clarify, who exactly didn't support him? The board? The hierarchy? The fans? He refused to say. That refusal mattered more than people realized. Because once a manager publicly hints at internal division and won't explain what he means, the conversation shifts. It stops being about results. It becomes about power, about alignment, about who's really in control. And at Chelsea, that's always a dangerous place to stand. If you wanted one match that summed up the entire December collapse, it was this. Chelsea 2-2 Bournemouth. Chelsea went ahead. They looked in control. And then once again, they let it slip. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a shock. It was just familiar. That draw didn't just cost 2 points. It confirmed what everyone had started to fear. This wasn't a rough patch. This was a pattern. The same script playing out over and over. By that point, supporters had stopped asking, will this pass? They'd started asking, what is fundamentally broken here? And that's when form turned into politics. By the time December ended, Chelsea weren't just struggling on the pitch. They were in a situation where every single moment became evidence in a case people were building. The dropped leads, the discipline issues, the constant rotation that never seemed to settle, the cryptic comment about internal tension. December didn't just test the players' legs, it tested trust between the manager and the club, between the manager and the supporters, between the manager and the people above him. And once trust starts to crack, results stop being the only thing that matters. That's why December didn't just damage Maresca's Chelsea, it ended it. Because by the time January rolled around, the conversation wasn't about bouncing back anymore. It was about whether the project even existed, and as we now know, it didn't. By the time Chelsea FC walked off the pitch against Bournemouth, the December curse had already done its damage. But what followed that 2-2 draw pushed the situation from bad form into something far more dangerous. Because this time, the collapse wasn't just tactical, it was symbolic. Chelsea were supposed to do what clubs always do in moments like this: explain, reflect, steady the noise, and move on. Instead, Enzo Maresca didn't appear. No post-match press conference, no face in front of the cameras, no immediate explanation. Assistant coach Willy Caballero stepped in instead, with the club officially citing illness as the reason for Maresca's absence.
He didn't feel well in the last 2 days. It was with a bit of temperature 2 days ago.
On paper, that explanation was reasonable, but football doesn't operate on paper. It operates on context, and the context could not have been worse. Chelsea were already deep into a poor run of form. The fan base was visibly restless. Reports of tension between the manager and the board were circulating, and just days earlier, Maresca himself had hinted publicly that many people didn't support the team. In that environment, silence doesn't feel neutral, it feels loaded. When a manager misses media duties in a calm moment, it passes quietly. When he misses them in the middle of a storm, it feels like a message, whether intended or not. The Bournemouth draw made that storm impossible to ignore, because that match didn't just damage the table, it exposed a club losing its grip on the narrative. That same match produced another flashpoint, one that spoke directly to the mood inside Stamford Bridge. Cole Palmer, Chelsea's most productive attacker and creative hub, was substituted. The reaction was immediate. Boos, chants, frustration aimed straight at the dugout. This matters because Palmer isn't just another player. He's the face of Chelsea's attacking threat, the one player fans instinctively trust to rescue games when control slips. So when the crowd reacts like that to his substitution, it tells you something critical. This wasn't just anger at a result, it was anger at direction. And in the space of 90 minutes, Chelsea suddenly had 3 fires burning at once. Results: leads dropped, points slipping away, fans openly turning on decisions, internal tension, a manager suddenly absent from the public conversation. That combination doesn't create pressure, it creates instability. This is where the debate around Maresca moved from emotion into football substance. Rotation. From the moment Maresca arrived, rotation was part of the plan. Chelsea have one of the youngest squads in the league, heavy schedules across competitions, and a calendar that punishes physical mismanagement. In isolation, rotating makes sense, but scale changes everything. By this point in the season, Maresca had made 119 changes to his starting lineups across 23 matches. That is not marginal rotation, that is systemic upheaval. Even if you defend rotation philosophically, the football consequences are unavoidable. Chemistry struggles to form because partnerships rarely repeat. Automatisms break down because timing depends on familiarity. Defensive relationships reset weekly, increasing small errors. Leadership becomes unclear because the hierarchy on the pitch keeps changing. This isn't about one controversial selection, it's about rhythm, and Chelsea rarely looked like a team playing in rhythm. Nowhere was this more visible than at the back. Chelsea's defensive line changed constantly. Different center back pairings, different fullback profiles, different build-up angles from game to game. In a system built on precision and spacing, that lack of continuity is costly, and this is where fan frustration peaked, because it wasn't just that players were rotated, it was which players were rotated. Wesley Fofana, when fit, offers exactly what Chelsea lacked during the winter run: pace, physicality, recovery speed, and defensive authority. Josh Akayempong, meanwhile, provided energy and reliability that fans immediately recognized, yet both were used inconsistently, rotated in and out even as Chelsea's biggest weakness became protecting leads. So the question supporters kept asking was simple: why rotate stability when instability is your biggest problem? And it didn't stop at the back. In attack, Estevan, one of Chelsea's most dangerous individual attackers, remained underused at moments when the team clearly needed unpredictability and spark. When games were slipping away, fans looked to the bench and saw a potential solution unused. At that point, rotation stopped being an abstract tactical discussion. It became personal. Names, faces, decisions that felt increasingly hard to justify while points evaporated week after week. This is where the Maresca debate became genuinely complex and genuinely fair, because there were always 2 possible explanations for what we were watching. Option 1, Maresca was choosing this. He believed heavy rotation was essential to sustain intensity, protect young players, and keep the system functional across competitions. Option 2, Maresca felt forced into it. Squad management pressures, availability issues, and internal dynamics were pushing constant change, even when it damaged cohesion. Reports around Chelsea suggested growing tension over autonomy and influence, raising questions about how much freedom the head coach truly had within the club's structure. If that's true, then what fans interpreted as confusion may have been something else entirely. A coach trying to impose a long-term system inside a club structure that doesn't fully release control, while results demand immediate answers. That is not a stable environment for any manager. This stretch, the Bournemouth draw, the press conference absence, the Palmer boos, the rotation chaos, is where Chelsea's situation stopped being about fixtures and became about identity. Who is really steering the club? Who sets the priorities? And when things wobble, who absorbs the pressure. Because at that point, Chelsea no longer looked like a club aligned behind a project. They looked like a club pulling in different directions, between the dugout, the boardroom, and the stands. And once silence enters the story, speculation takes over. What happened next wasn't sudden. It was the conclusion of a process that had already begun. And by the time Chelsea made their decision, the trust was already gone. January has delivered the verdict. Chelsea have ended Enzo Maresca's reign, bringing a close to a project that promised long-term control, delivered trophies, and still collapsed under internal strain. And that's the warning sign, because this wasn't a manager removed after failure. It was a manager removed after success. Once alignment broke. In football, results can calm noise, but when politics enter the pitch, results stop being enough. Now the spotlight shifts. The next appointment will tell us everything about Chelsea's future. Whether this club is ready to commit to a plan or destined to keep starting over. What happens next won't just shape this season, it will define what Chelsea are for years to come.